before we start, it would be very helpful to get you on record. And from my left, if you don't mind introducing yourself and who you are, and if you wish to say who you represent, feel free to do so. If any of you want to make a short statement to start with, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, we'll press on to the questions. So if I might start from my left, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Lorraine Turner. I'm the Technical and Business Development Director at the United Kingdom Accreditation Service, UKAS. My responsibilities there include technical governance, development of accreditation of new areas, government engagement and stakeholder management. And I'm also a member of the Forensic Science Regulators Forensic Science Advisory Council. I can give a short introduction to UKAS. Would it be helpful to do that now?
Well, if you're not already sent us in the written evidence, if you have, then we don't need it because we have it.
Okay. I think perhaps just to emphasise, UKAS accreditation attests the competence of organisations and their impartiality. So we carry out assessments against international standards, and I know those standards have been the topic of discussion in the committee, and we'd be happy to talk about those further. We've currently accredited over 60 or issued over 60 accreditation certificates in the area of forensic science. So it just gives you a bit of background.
Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Monnery. I'm the Forensic Accreditation Specialist at the United Kingdom Accreditation Service, UKAS. I've worked at UKAS for over 22 years and been involved in the assessment of forensic science organisations for about 20 of those years. I'm a member of the Forensic Science Regulators Quality Standards Specialist Group and Fingerprint Specialist Group, and also am a member of the National Police Chief Council Performance and Standards Group and National Quality Managers Group. I was also involved in the international committee that wrote ILAC G19. Thank you.
What was that?
ILAC G19. It's the document that we use alongside 17025 for the forensic context in terms of 17025 and 17020. Thank you.
It relates to about what your role is of your organizations in both standard setting and regulation in forensic science, and what standards, including how do you set the standards, including for ISOs, including, for instance, ISO 17025. How do you develop these standards, and what do you think are future challenges in terms of both developing standards and accreditation in view of the new forensic science that's developing?
I think the role of UKAS, it mirrors in many ways the role of BSI, but our function is as the national accreditation body. So we too operate under a memorandum of understanding with government through BAYS as well. And it's that memorandum of understanding that outlines our role in terms of the standards that we use to assess and accredit organisations. So that is the reference point for that. So we use those standards, and in the case of forensic science, the standards that we use are ISO 17025 for the laboratory testing activities, and also ISO 17020, which is a standard for generically called for inspection bodies, but is used to assess the crime scene examination, the sort of front end of the forensic process. So we take those standards and we use technical experts to interpret and apply those criteria to evaluate and assess the competence of organisations. You asked about the challenges that we face. The challenges, they sort of fall into two camps. We have operational challenges and technical challenges. The technical challenges are around the interpretation and application of the standards. We utilise technical expertise to do that, both at the coalface when we're carrying out our assessments by using peers, and also in terms of the governance and management of the accreditation programme through our advisory council structure, committee structure. The operational challenges have been quite considerable in recent years because of the requirement for accreditation. The deadlines are set, and looking at the flow of work, the pipeline of work has private providers, police forces coming forward for accreditation. But they're challenges that we manage well, and we work with stakeholders in order to be able to get the engagement and support to deliver the accreditation.
Okay, thank you very much. Baroness Manningham-Buller.
Thank you. That moves on to really what the experience of the people seeking accreditation is. Now, you said at the beginning in your opening remarks that you're there to decide on competence, but also on impartiality. How do the people who are seeking accreditation from you give you that assurance? What's the process?
The process is one where they need to demonstrate that competence. So that is through the format of an assessment, which covers looking at their documentation, their policies and processes, the principles that they have in place in their organisation. And then our assessment includes the witnessing of activities. So we look at the tests that they perform, the samples they take. So
you go into the labs.
We go into the laboratories, and we go on site as well, where there's site activities. So we actually witness the evaluation activities that they are conducting, and we look at records. So we look at evidence that they have followed their systems and processes in the past. We look at the management controls that they have in place to ensure sustainability of the application of those principles and policies and processes in future.
And you haven't touched yet on you've been largely talking about the competence component. What about the impartial component? How do you judge that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take... particularly in relation to the forensic aspects, we'd be looking at impartiality in terms of perhaps the hypotheses that people were putting forward in terms of what they were looking at in what they were given to examine, and how they were looking at what they were given to examine in terms of a prosecution bias perhaps, or something that they were looking for in terms of an alternative hypothesis to what had been presented to them. So we're looking at their weighing up the evidence rather than taking a particular view depending on whether someone had come and been the customer in that regard.
And you choose which samples to look at?
Yes, during the witnessing.
Rather than wait for what they give you?
Absolutely. So we would perhaps ask for some to be prepared in advance if we were wanting to see particular records of particular activities. But we would also then take the opportunity to see what was going on during the laboratory work or at the crime scene, whatever it be, that we would look to see just general work going through the process. We also review a lot of case records, so we would go back over cases that had been completed, which we would select at random.
Thank you. Just one final question. We've had some evidence that this is quite an overhead for small providers of forensic services. Do you have any way of mitigating the costs for them so they're not driven out of the business?
We have been doing some work on that.
Yes, we do. Our costs, the costs, there's two elements to the costs for an organisation to go through the accreditation process. One is the cost of implementing the improvements to address any gaps that they have in their system. And those costs are sort of not really the things that are within our control, because they are the measures that they put in place before they come forward for accreditation, or certainly before they're granted accreditation. In terms of the fees that they pay to us to cover the cost of conducting the assessment, we are very mindful of the impact that has on small businesses. We've been working with the Forensic Science Regulator and the Chartered Society of Forensic Science to look at ways in which we can reduce the amount of time it takes to conduct the assessment. So where there are efficiencies that we can build in. So one example of that is where the Chartered Society is putting in place a set of sort of standard documentation that the small businesses can then adopt, and we only need to assess that documentation once, and that can bring about a reduction in the amount of time it takes to conduct the assessment.
You mentioned inspections. Are these planned inspections, or do you do unannounced inspections?
We can do both, really. We have a programme of visits that we would conduct to an organisation. So generally we would visit each organisation once it's accredited annually, but we can make the decision to make that more frequent, or we can do it in response to a quality incident or a complaint, or we can undertake unannounced visits as well if we feel that would be necessary.
And how many of these unannounced inspections do you do on average?
I did one not that long ago, actually, in response to a quality incident. So we don't do them very frequently. I would say it's not a routine, but in response to issues we can do. We did do some work about probably 3 or 4 years ago where we actually did routine unannounced visits just to give ourselves confidence in what was being undertaken in the forensic science area, and we found actually that went very well. People actually embraced it quite well, and it didn't raise any significant concerns that we needed to take forward any further.